All right, guys, it's week 14, almost fantasy playoffs. I mean, for some of you, it already has started. So, as usual, we got some boom picks for you guys we feel could come up huge. And this week, again, you don't win without taking some chances. We got to pick a player that you would not expect in this video.
Oh, man. What could go wrong, right?
Now, first, before we get to those picks, do us a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. I know the season is coming to an end. We're almost at our goal. It's 100K subscribers. We appreciate everyone who's already subscribed to the channel. If you haven't done it yet, please do so now. Well, let's start things off with a running back guy who has gone really from nothing to potential league winner. Look, you figure when the season started, you have Bucky Irving, you start him, no questions asked, but we didn't see him for weeks. We didn't know when we were going to see him. And then last week, we just didn't know if we could trust him. How healthy was he? How good is this Bucs offense? We mostly had our questions answered, but some people are still skeptical. So look, on the downside last week, he only averaged 3.6 yards per carry, and it wasn't a huge rushing output, and also only 2 catches. So now you got to wonder, we've seen guys like Rachaad White and Sean Tucker be involved. Is Bucky going to get back to what we thought he would be, what he was last year? Well, on the flip side, you have to remember this was his first game back after missing several weeks. Of course, they were going to not put him out there for 100% of the snaps, and he's going to regain his role as a pass catcher. And when that happens, he will be fully unlocked. And the good news is he did get 17 carries in his first action. Meanwhile, both those other running backs, only 2 carries each. And Bucky Irving, I think most importantly, it's not just that he scored a touchdown. He should have scored another touchdown, which got called back by a penalty, but he just looked like himself. He looked explosive. He was sharp as a runner. And as soon as he's back to full usage, which could be as soon as this week, I mean, there's no telling what he could do. But this week, again, just no hesitation. You've got to lock him in against the Saints.
Got to lock him in against the Saints. The Saints allowing the 5th most rushing yards on the year. And you talked about it with that pass catching. Yeah, only 2 receptions last week, but you got to think that number is going to go up. They're allowing the 10th highest yards per target to running back, so there's a chance for him to not only rack up yards on the ground, but through the air as well. Not only that, they're allowing the 11th worst adjusted yards before contact per attempt of all teams, so this should not be one of those games. And we've kind of seen that with Bucky. Even back before the injury, the efficiency wasn't there. I think this is the week we see him get back to the efficiency we kind of saw last year that we kind of expected from Bucky Irving here. Plus, look at it over the last 2 games. The Saints have allowed 274 yards on 54 attempts. Now, granted, they played the Falcons and the Dolphins, so they played Bijan Robinson and Devon Achane, but Bucky Irving's also an elite running back. And then, like you said, last week, he got pretty much all the touches in this backfield. If he gets them all again this week, which he probably will, he should have even more touches because the Bucs are currently the biggest favorites of the week, 8.5-point favorites. It would be shocking if the Saints are, even in this game, let alone winning this game. This should be a game where the Bucs are in control, running the ball, in the 4th quarter, and that's when Bucky, will start taking over and get even more carries. After what we saw last week, you should be feeling great about Bucky. In this matchup, you got to start him.
Well, next up, very similar running back. Chase Brown. It's been a very up and down season for him. Started out the season so slow. And then, as soon as Jake Browning got benched, like magic, he was an effective runner again. The combination of Joe Flacco and now again Joe Burrow, well, it looks like it's unlocked Chase Brown. Ever since that happened with they acquired Flacco, he's been averaging 5.7 yards per carry. And he has been a verifiable bell cow. He's getting all the touches, mainly because Samaje Perine was out for a few weeks with a high ankle sprain. And here's the problem. This is why some people are now wondering, do I start Chase Brown this week? Because Perine came back last week, and that definitely put a noticeable dent in Chase Brown's production because he only had 52% of the carries last week. It was almost an even split here, and only 61% of the expected fantasy points on the week. And more alarmingly, Perine was getting some touches near the goal line. We don't want to see that. And in this game where you're going to have the Bengals and the Bills, the headline is definitely going to be the quarterbacks, right? You figure this is going to be a shootout. What is Chase Brown's role going to be? Is he just going to be a timeshare back on a pass-heavy offense going forward? Well, the answer is not exactly, because sure, Perine will still have a role, but Chase Brown last week, he had 7 receptions compared to only 2 for Perine, and he's going against a defense that has not only given up its share of receptions to running backs, which you figure he'll be used that way, they've just been terrible to running backs all season long.
Yeah, they have. Right now, they're allowing the third most fantasy points to running backs, the third highest yards per carry, and they've given up the most touchdowns to running backs. Plus, they have the fifth worst adjusted yards before contact per attempt. And look, last week they did do a pretty good job against the Steelers kind of out of nowhere, but prior to that, they had allowed 90 or more rushing yards in 3 straight games, and they've allowed over 100 rushing yards in more than half of their games this year. I'm not just going to say last week they became a good run defense. They were playing the Steelers. They knew they didn't have to worry about the pass. They could sell out to stop the run. They're not going to be able to do that this week against Joe Burrow. And look, we don't like to go too deep into weather. We've been burned by thinking the weather is going to be bad before. But there is a 50% chance of snow in this game right now. That doesn't mean it's going to snow. But if it does snow, you know that means better for the running game, better for Chase Brown here. And look, let's take it a step further. I looked at his line on Underdog. 48.5 rushing yards. He's had at least 78 rushing yards in 3 straight games. He's gone over 73 rushing yards in 5 of the last 6 games. You're telling me he can't get 49 rushing yards against this Bills defense? I'm taking the higher on that. You pair it with the new customer special you're going to get if you're signing up for Underdog for the first time. Patrick Mahomes just doing anything, you win that pick right there. Just make sure when you join using promo code ENDGAME, because not only is that going to get you that free pick, it's also going to get you a deposit match, 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Plus, as soon as you play just $5 on any picks, win or lose, they're going to give you another $100 in bonus cash.
Now, in a game you figure might not be quite so high scoring, got the Texans and that elite defense against the Chiefs and a pretty good defense. And man, these offenses, I think including the Chiefs, have not exactly been lighting it up here. So where does that, leave a guy like Nico Collins, who has been really good lately, but could he have a down game? We actually think it's going to be the opposite here. You've got to lock in Nico Collins this week. And look, he's been absolutely on fire lately. This is exactly what we've expected from Nico all season long. It just took the Texans some time to figure it out. They have figured it out. And so that's why over the last 4 weeks, Nico's been the wide receiver 2 in PPR. He has been one of the best, bar none. He's been better, if you haven't noticed, over the past month than guys like Puka Nacua, right? He is outscoring nearly everybody because he's finally getting a healthy dose of targets. He's gotten 75 or more yards in 4 of the last 5. He's gotten double-digit targets in 5 of the last 6. And as Scott Barrett put in his everything report for this week, in terms of expected fantasy points, Nico has been 3rd among all receivers in expected fantasy points per game since week 7. Texans have figured out how to get him the ball. They're going to continue to do it even against a tough Chiefs defense, which, well, it's not quite as tough as it used to be.
Yeah, I don't know what has happened to this Chiefs defense, this Chiefs secondary, but over the last 3 weeks, they're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Not only that, they're allowing the highest yards per target of any defense over that span. And then you look at, they have very good corners, but for some reason, they have fallen off a cliff recently, and I don't know why. Trent McDuffie, supposed to be one of the best corners in the NFL. Over the last 2 games, according to Pro Football Focus, he's allowed 9 catches on his 12 targets, and he's given up a touchdown in each of those games. Their other corner, Jalen Watson, last week against the Cowboys, gave up 7 catches for 104 yards. I don't know what has happened here, but this secondary that was shutting down everybody is now getting torched by everybody. We just saw CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens have big games against the Chiefs. I am not scared of this matchup at all here for Nico Collins. Like you said, I think the offensive coordinator, remember, I think one thing we kind of maybe undervalued going into this season is that they did have a new offensive coordinator. I think it's taking them time to figure out how to use Nico in the right way, but it looks like they have figured it out. And against these corners that have been struggling lately for whatever reason, yeah, I think Nico's going to keep the hot streak going.
Now, it always feels a little risky picking a Jag because it feels like every week it's a different guy who's getting the hot hand, and sometimes they let us down. But it seems like we might have a new number 1 target in town. And no, I'm not talking about BTJ returning last week. If anything, that just proved that Jakobi Meyers is the number 1 guy here, because Brian Thomas Jr., despite actually playing and being healthy throughout the game, did almost nothing. And meanwhile, Jakobi Meyers, who's now been there in Jacksonville for a few weeks, He led the team with 90% route participation and a 40% first read target share. That is massive. But again, it's just all the other receivers that are there. Sure, you have guys who could do something, but they're paling in comparison to what Jacoby has done. Don't forget Parker Washington banged up with that hip injury last week. Don't know if he's going to be good to go. BTJ, again, just not a factor here. Jacoby Myers is now the number one receiver for a pretty good offense. And you know what? He's actually shown a little bit of a ceiling. Had a long reception last week. He's actually scoring touchdowns. He's finally in a good offense, and this is all it took. And this week, he's actually in a good matchup.
Yeah, it could be a great matchup here against the Colts. Colts have allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers on the year. And even if you look at it, like I know they went out, they traded for Sauce Gardner. You think, okay, the secondary's better lately. But even if in the games that Sauce Gardner has played and actually finished, so I didn't, excluding last week where he left the game, they're still allowing the 13th most points to wide receivers. And look, he's dealing with a calf injury. There's no guarantee he plays this week, which would even be better for Jacoby Myers. And then their other corner, Charvarius Ward, this guy was great earlier this year. Then remember, he got his second concussion, went on IR, and ever since coming back, he's been horrible. In the 2 games he has played since going on IR, he's allowed 9 catches on 15 targets and 162 total yards. Not only that, he's allowed 15.3 and 20.2 yards per reception in those games. I don't think this guy is right. I think that second concussion, it's nothing, it's a serious thing. I think it has affected him. He just has not looked the same since coming back. So there's a chance Sauce Gardner's going to be out. Charvarius Ward has been struggling. And like you said, BTJ, Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers has shown ever since he's gotten to Jacksonville, really, he is the wide receiver 1 here. This is a great spot for him to have another big game.
All right, now it's time for that surprise pick. It's shocking yet not shocking to see this player on here, but just going to say real quick, we try to make sure we get these right. We want to pick players we feel really confident are going to have those big weeks. But sometimes you got to take a risk, right? Sometimes there's a guy that you throw in your flex, and you're like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know what the ceiling could be. I think we all know what the ceiling could be for Justin Jefferson. It's the best receiver in the entire NFL. And yet he has been so disappointing. I can't say him. I hate even saying that because it is not his fault. We all saw Max Brosmer last week, but we've seen J.J. McCarthy for the few weeks before it. Now McCarthy is back at quarterback. Why would that make us feel better? Well, first, it's not like he did absolutely nothing, Justin Jefferson. There was a floor. So in the previous 4 games where J.J. McCarthy was a quarterback, at least Justin Jefferson caught 4 passes in each of those games, did squeak out double-digit points for your fantasy team in a couple of them, actually scored one of his 2 touchdowns on the season in one of those games. Is McCarthy going to be better after taking a week off? I can't guarantee it, but at the same time, if there is a week for him to bounce back, this is it.
This is definitely it. It's the Washington Commanders, and I think this is good for both, Jefferson and McCarthy. Not that I'm saying to start McCarthy or anything, but certainly good for Jefferson. Commanders have allowed the 5th most points to wide receivers, and their 2 top corners, Marshawn Lattimore and Trey Amos, who really weren't even that good anyways, are both out. Their next best corners rank 87th and 91st among 110 qualified cornerbacks according to Pro Football Focus. They've allowed over 100 yards to wide receivers in every game but one. That was your Dolphins, who I guess refuse to throw the football these days. And they've allowed over 200 yards to wide receivers in 4 games this year. They're allowing the 3rd highest yards per target to wide receivers. And why I think this is also a good spot for J.J. McCarthy, and by extension Justin Jefferson, other than everything else we've already said, is they're not a fearsome pass rush. And that's kind of been one of the issues here. Yes, J.J. McCarthy has struggled. Max Brosmer was horrendous. But also the loss of Christian Darrisaw, this offensive line, the pass protection has been horrible for the Vikings. This is not a game where you have to worry about the Commanders, getting constant pressure on J.J. McCarthy. He's going to have more time in the pocket. Justin Jefferson should have no problem getting open all over the field against this defense. If he can't have a big game this week in this matchup, then yeah, it might be over for 2025.
All right, but it's not over yet here. We each got a pick that we're going to recommend, someone we think could have a big game this week. All right, let's start with you.
Well, I'm going to cheat, I guess, a little bit. I'm going to do a combo here because at the time we're filming this, I don't know if Marvin Harrison is going to play here in Week 14. So I'm going to say it's either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Michael Wilson that is going to boom here, because the new Jameis Winston at QB is apparently Jacoby Brissett. Who knew? Who knew this was the guy that could unlock fantasy gold for wide receivers? He has yet to attempt less than 31 passes in any game this year as the starter, and he's thrown 40 or more passes in all but 2 games. And in the last 5 starts, here is how whoever the healthy wide receiver 1 was for the Cardinals has done. In Week 9, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 10 targets, 7 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown. In Week 10, he had 12 targets, somehow only caught 3 of them for 33 yards, but he did score a touchdown in that game. Week 11, Michael Wilson, 18 targets, 15 catches, 185 yards. Week 12, Michael Wilson, 15 targets, 10 catches, 118 yards. Then we get to last week. Now, last week was interesting because Marvin Harrison did come back, but he left very early in the 4th quarter. But look what he did in the first 3 quarters. He ran 77% of the routes, had 7 targets, 6 catches, and 69 yards. Again, in just 3 quarters. Then what happened in the 4th quarter with Marvin Harrison basically out? Michael Wilson went from only having 3 targets in that game to getting 4 targets in the 4th quarter alone and finishing the game with 7 targets. Whoever is the wide receiver 1 here is going to feast with Jacoby Brissett, and now they're playing this Rams team at home. You know the Rams, coming off that loss, are going to put up a ton of points on this Cardinals defense, and that means Jacoby Brissett is going to be throwing it 45, 50 times again this week. So, look, if Marvin Harrison plays, he's going to boom. But if he's out, Michael Wilson is going to boom.
Well, one of the things I find hard to believe in 2025 is I'm now finding myself becoming a Christian Watson truther. Yeah, I've been talking about him for weeks now. Pick him up on the waiver wire. You got to add him. It's almost a crime that he's somehow unowned in so many leagues still. And now I'm like, why isn't everybody just starting him? I mean, look at what's happened here. He's been not only becoming the number 1 target for the Green Bay Packers, it's such a smash spot against the Chicago Bears. Well, look, I get it. Some people look at last week's game and like, oh, Dontavian Wicks, he's the guy now, right? Yeah, we know exactly what Dontavian Wicks does. He's like the groundhog. He comes out once a year, makes an appearance, and then he's like, peace out. Look, he had his game. Great. Scored a couple touchdowns. Looked great last week. He's going to disappear. Christian Watson, meanwhile, I mean, he put up decent numbers as well, and he did score a touchdown, as did Romeo Doubs. But Christian Watson had 10 targets, and he has gradually ramped up in the weeks since he's returned from injury. 4, 4, 4, 5, 7, 10. His target share continues to climb. I don't see why it would go down. This is what they want. They want him to be that number 1 guy, and he's been doing it. He's been effective ever since he's been out there. Meanwhile, Dontavian Wicks, he's been there all season. He hasn't been hurt, and yet this was only the 3rd time all season for him that he was over 4 targets. Meanwhile, Watson has done it each of the past 3 weeks. So I'm not buying into that as far as Wicks goes. Watson, I am buying into it. We've seen him before. When he's out there, when he's healthy, he's going to get targeted. He has that explosive big play ability. You know this. He's going to get targeted in the red zone. We know that's going to happen as well. And look, last week, his usage was even better than you might realize. He was 14th overall among all flex options in expected fantasy points. So he is delivering on exactly what you would expect, and I continue to think that he's going to be a top 20 player overall, which means he's a high-end wide receiver too. And against this Bears defense, I mean, come on. The Bears are not a great defense. We know this, but also this is a great spot because Christian Watson does better against man coverage. The Bears defense play man coverage at one of the highest rates. They're top 10 as far as that goes. Watson kills man coverage. He's averaging 2.08 yards per route run against man. He's always been able to beat this type of defense. Don't see any reason why he wouldn't do it again this week. All right, get those guys in your lineups and hope that they go off for you. Expect that they will. Now, of course, you got a lot more questions at every position. You know we've got Start Sit for you and everything you need to win in Week 14 right here.